ladies and gentlemen. The penmanship may have been a little tough on the poster board, but taking into account that's somewhat limiting the type of device, I'm happy now to open it up to the ladies and gentlemen of the press for any questions they may have.
J.D., with the 10 components of your contract with Arizona, what are some of the most important to you?
Well, first and foremost, as you take a look at the list, number one is my pledge to the people of Arizona that I will reintroduce the Enforcement First Act. Yeah! I will do everything I can to protect the safety and sovereignty of the United States, to oppose amnesty in all of its forms, and to oppose existing immigration law. And the second promise I make, and I am so glad that my friends from television and radio and you ladies and gentlemen of the press are here. This is a solid commitment to the people of Arizona. Should you honor me with a chance to serve in the United States Senate and would extend to me the honor of 2 consecutive 6-year terms, that will be a total of 12 years. That will complete my service in the United States Senate. Then I will step aside and another citizen will have the chance to serve. So I think that is very important. The other point I would make about item number 2 is the fact that more than a personal commitment, I will work to bring the notion of term limits, as we saw a half-century ago, actually greater than a half-century ago. Constitutionally, we impose term limits on the executive branch. I obviously believe there should be term limits on the legislative branch. And I would likewise point out that we need term limits on the federal judiciary.
Congressman, when you were elected 16 years ago, you said then, as you said now, 12 years in office and you're done. In 2006, you were running for a 7th term, which would have been up to 14 years. Why is it different this time?
Well, again, understand what I said was I would sign a contract with America, and understand what we pledged to do with that House majority, to bring items to the floor for a vote. Now, as it turned out, and of course you're right, I did vote for a 12-year term limit. But citizens of Arizona came to me saying, wait a minute, you're the guy who actually had a hand in cutting taxes as a member of the Ways and Means Committee. You're someone who has actually worked on behalf of the state, dealing with those problems of taxation and those very real challenges facing a state like Arizona with so much federally controlled land, and you have a unique position. You serve on the Resources Committee and the Ways and Means Committee. We would like you to stay in the Congress. But as we know, it became a moot point. And I understand now what is said, Jonathan, experience is the best teacher. I had a chance to come home and to reconnect with the citizens of Arizona through the profession of broadcasting, holding daily town halls Monday through Friday for 3 hours at a time. And it was reaffirmed to me the wisdom of setting an ironclad term limit. Understand there are no technicalities here, there are no trap doors. This is a solid 12-year commitment, and that'll be it.
Yeah. Take on the governor's proposal for a special session to tweak 1070?
I believe 1070 is sound as is. I wouldn't presume to lecture the governor. I believe that in many ways 1070 mirrors my own Enforcement First Act, and I will work at the federal level to the extent that there are those who are reluctant to enforce immigration law or seek to embrace poll-tested phrases, and I speak of those in Washington, D.C., not anyone serving in state government. But the one thing that I will do as the United States Senator from Arizona is reintroduce the Enforcement First Act to make sure, and I think I'm going to have a lot of company because elections offer a great clarifying moment, and we will do at the federal level what Arizona has had the courage to do individually.
So you don't think there's anything to the president's argument that it's the entree to a patchwork of 50 different immigration laws?
Oh, the President of the United States, this can be solved in one easy step. If those trying to come to the country illegally wanted to come here and register Republican, I guarantee you the President of the United States would have no trouble seeing fundamental disconnection. Whether it's Barack Obama or Janet Napolitano or John McCain, they all view this as a political problem to be managed, instead of seeing it for what it really is, a national security threat, an economic security threat, and an invasion that must be stopped.
Your opponent, as you run ads accusing you of being a pork barreler, if you get elected to the Senate, I mean, would you disavow any earmarks, and what would be your policy towards earmarks when you're in the Senate?
Dan, thanks for the question. As a matter of fact, proofreader that you are, we'll make sure that you have a copy of the contract. Item number 10 is earmark reform. Now let's understand the tough business of government. It doesn't mean preening and posing and issuing press releases saying how you stand against spending. And indeed, it was very interesting. When you think about the seniority, and I think this is what voters should consider, because now the McCain folks, in their desperation, in addition to sophomoric stunts and name-calling, have said, oh, gee, John McCain has all this seniority. How has he ever used it to benefit Arizona? I would simply point out that there are, even in a new age of austerity, there are going to be situations where we are going to have investment. For example, as I've made the point repeatedly in town hall meetings, if I had within my power the ability to direct $1 billion of spending to fortify Arizona's border with Sonora, I would do it in a New York nanosecond. Here's the key: earmark reform. Making the case publicly as to why there should be investments made, not sneaking things through in the dark of night. And again, just to point out the inherent, I'd like to call it confusion, but it's more accurate to call it dishonesty. The inherent dishonesty in the McCain campaign issuing mailers saying that I embraced some $70 billion in pork spending. It's the oldest Washington trick in the world. Pick out a couple of admittedly boondoggle projects that I never ever embraced as part of a larger spending bill. For example, the so-called Bridge to Nowhere, if memory serves, I believe that was part of the 2005 transportation appropriation that included $800 million plus for border security, not to mention the critical infrastructure needed for Arizona's roads and highways. Now, I guess I could have voted no and issued a press release about it, but was that really fair to Arizona? No, the key is earmark reform, and to understand, despite the best efforts of some to claim to be constitutionalists, to understand that the ultimate authority for spending and the power of the purse resides in the legislative branch. And if you were to give that away, to whom would it go? The unelected and therefore unaccountable Washington bureaucrats. And so the fact is, I'm honest enough to say there will be those projects, even in the new age of austerity, that warrant reasonable investment. Earmark reform would involve being totally candid and upfront about those projects, making them clear in the light of day, making sure they pertain specifically to Arizona, and then move forward with respect for the citizenry to have a dialogue on those priorities rather than issuing press releases and preening and trying basically to take away a constitutional prerogative of the Congress of the United States.
One more question, please.
Sorry. How would you make it more transparent? How do you shine more light on it?
Well, as a matter of fact, and help me with the entity was National Taxpayers or Citizens Against Government Waste. One of the groups, and I don't want to be wrong because given the fact that my words are assiduously videotaped and always there are pickers of nit to suggest I'm less than intellectually sharp, I don't want to misspeak on the group, but I have signed specific earmark reform